In 1994, a German archaeologist came to a hilltop in southeastern Turkey to look at some strange stones. Local shepherds had been tripping over them for decades. The tips of enormous T-shaped pillars protruded from the earth. Archaeological reports said medieval cemetery, maybe Byzantine, not very interesting. Klaus Schmidt looked once and knew it was not medieval, not Byzantine, not Roman, not Greek, not Egyptian. It was older than all of that. Older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than any city on the planet. 12,000 years, when humans had not yet invented agriculture, had not domesticated animals, did not make pottery, did not use metal, had no writing, did not build villages, and yet they built this. 50-ton limestone monoliths set in circles, carvings of beasts, a construction project requiring hundreds of people and decades of labor, from a people our theory said was incapable of any of it. Göbekli Tepe, the oldest monumental architecture in human history. And it completely rewrites the story of how we became human. These are its streets. Only here, the streets are older than streets themselves. Göbekli Tepe stands on a hilltop in Şanlıurfa province, southeastern Turkey, about 15 kilometers from the modern city, on the very northern edge of the Fertile Crescent. In Turkish, the name means potbelly hill. The hill genuinely is a potbelly, low, wide, artificial. Humans made it, century by century, piling up earth over what they had built. To understand how impossible this place is, you have to understand the world that made it. 9,600 BC. The last ice age has just ended. The total human population of the planet is a few million people, all hunter-gatherers. No one anywhere is farming. No one is herding. No one lives in a permanent village. The largest settlement in the world at this moment is a band of 30 people walking behind a herd of gazelle. And against that backdrop, on an empty hill in Anatolia, somebody starts raising stones. Not small stones, limestone monoliths 5.5 meters tall, weighing up to 50 tons. Cut from a quarry several hundred meters away, with flint tools. Hauled uphill on wooden rollers and ropes braided from plant fiber. They set them in circles. Each circle is 10 to 12 pillars around the perimeter, plus 2 of the tallest at the very center. Between them, stone benches and walls. Today we know 4 major circles, A, B, C, and D. That is what Klaus Schmidt excavated across 20 years of work. It is less than 5% of what lies beneath the ground. Ground-penetrating radar has shown at least 16 more circles still waiting, and more than 200 T-shaped pillars no one has touched yet. Göbekli Tepe was used for about 1,500 years, from around 9,600 to roughly 8,000 BC. And during all of that time, there was no city nearby, no village, no permanent dwelling. People came here. Where from, we don't know. Göbekli Tepe had no streets. And that is the most important thing to understand about this place. No one lived here. Not one residential house has been found. Not one cooking hearth. Not one trace of daily life, children's toys, refuse, floorware. Göbekli Tepe was never a village or a city. It was a sanctuary. People came here and left. Imagine you were a pilgrim 12,000 years ago. You were walking here from your hunting camp, perhaps 50, perhaps 100, perhaps 200 kilometers away. You walk. It takes days. On the last rise, you see it. A white limestone crown on top of a hill, visible from miles. You enter. Each of the main circles of Göbekli Tepe is built the same way. An outer ring of pillars, a stone wall between them, shoulder high, half a meter thick. On the inner face of the wall, a stone bench running the full perimeter. When you enter, you sit on that bench. Before you, two central pillars, enormous, twice the height of a person. And they are looking at you. Because a T-shaped pillar at Göbekli Tepe is not an abstract stone. It is a stylized representation of a person. The vertical shaft is the body. The horizontal crossbar is the head, turned in profile. Many pillars have arms carved into them, bent at the elbow, fingers meeting on the belly. Some have belts, loincloths, fox pelts on the side. These are beings, faceless, but not impersonal. Who they are, we don't know. Gods, ancestors, spirits, something else. On their bodies, beasts. Foxes, snakes, scorpions, vultures, lions, wild boar, cranes. Almost all predators. Low relief, sometimes deep, three-dimensional carving. The carved animals crawl across the pillars, leap, twist. Some are locked in attack. This is not decoration. It is not landscape. It is iconography, ancient as writing itself, but invented long before writing existed. What it meant, we don't know. But people came here to look at it. They sat on the benches. They listened to those who knew. And they left, carrying in their heads what they had seen. Possibly the first religion in human history. Göbekli Tepe is a place where every answer breaks an old textbook. The first secret, how they built it at all. There is no agriculture, no farming, no permanent settlements, which means no food surplus on which you can feed a large group of people doing something other than hunting. And building Göbekli Tepe required exactly that. Large groups of people working not for food, but for stone. Hundreds of workers, decades. Somebody had to feed them. Where those resources came from, we don't know exactly. The excavation has produced enormous quantities of gazelle and aurochs bones. Some of the rock surfaces have hollows that may have been vats for fermenting grain, possibly the oldest beer in the world. It looks as if Göbekli Tepe was the site of massive feasts, thousands of people converging here several times a year. Hunters brought game, gatherers brought wild grain, and they ate together. From this, Klaus Schmidt drew the most radical conclusion in modern archaeology. Maybe it was the other way around. The old theory: people invent agriculture, settle into villages, then build cities, then build temples. Schmidt's theory: people first build the sanctuary. To feed the workers, they begin experimenting with wild grain. That is how agriculture is born. Then settlement, then cities. First the temple, then civilization. If that is true, then the most important invention in our species' history, agriculture, was not the product of hunger or practical necessity. It was a byproduct of religion. The second mystery: what they were carving. On Pillar 43, one of the most famous finds, there are images of a vulture, a scorpion, and several unusual symbols arranged in a strict order. The third mystery: the skull cult. In several layers, fragments of human skulls have been found with very strange modifications. Deliberate cuts, drilled holes, traces of red ochre paint. It appears the skulls were displayed publicly for some period, perhaps as the remains of respected ancestors, perhaps as trophies. This is one of the earliest evidence of specialized treatment of human remains in history. What they were doing with them, we don't know. And the fourth, what we haven't even seen yet. 95% of Göbekli Tepe is still underground. More than 200 pillars, 16 circles, unknown quantities of carving. Every year of new excavation brings something nobody expected. The most important discoveries are still ahead. Göbekli Tepe ended strangely. It was not destroyed. It was not burned. No one attacked it, and there was no one to attack it. Armies did not yet exist. Around 8000 BC, the people of that region did something that has no parallel in archaic history. They buried it, deliberately, carefully, with purpose. Somebody, or rather many generations of people in succession, filled Göbekli Tepe with earth, with animal bones, and with the refuse of ritual feasts. Each of the great circles was carefully packed from within. The pillars remained standing, but hidden, invisible, sealed. This was not a garbage dump. This was not a catastrophe. This was a rite. Only because of this could Göbekli Tepe survive intact for 12,000 years. Why they buried it, we don't know. Maybe the religion changed. Old gods gave way to new ones. The old sanctuary had to disappear, so it would not stand in the way. Maybe it had become too sacred to remain visible. They put it into the earth, the way one buries a respected dead who must finally leave. Maybe the world that had built it was vanishing, and its people chose to close the temple with their own hands, before someone else could desecrate it. Maybe all of these together. Either way, while they were filling in Göbekli Tepe, in the valleys around it, the first wheat fields were already growing. The first sheep were following the first shepherds. The first roundhouses were appearing where only temporary shelters had stood. The pilgrims of Göbekli Tepe were becoming farmers. 1,000 years later, 10 kilometers from the buried sanctuary, a new complex was built, Karahan Tepe. Similar, also with T-shaped pillars, also with carving, but smaller, more modest. The age of the great stone pilgrimage centers was ending. The age of cities was beginning. In 2018, UNESCO added Göbekli Tepe to the World Heritage List. A light canopy was built over the excavation to protect the stones from rain and sun. Archaeologists continue to dig. Every year, a new pillar, a new T-stone, new carving no one has ever seen. But the most important legacy of Göbekli Tepe is not archaeological. It is philosophical. Before its discovery, we thought civilization was buildings and cities, and that religion came later, when there was leisure time and surplus food. Göbekli Tepe reversed this. First, people gathered, not for food, not for safety, but to revere something in common. To look together at carvings none of them would have made alone. To raise together stones none of them could have lifted alone. And for that, they learned to grow wheat. For that, they began to live together permanently. For that, they built the first cities. Civilization did not begin with agriculture. Civilization began when several bands of hunter-gatherers agreed to converge on one place, and decided that the place was more important than they were. 12,000 years later, we are still doing it. We build churches, mosques, synagogues, temples. We gather in stadiums. We come together for concerts, for funerals, for weddings. We do exactly what those nameless people did on a hill in Anatolia. We gather around something larger than ourselves. This is not a cave instinct. It is the first thing that made us human. And none of it would exist without the temple they built before they invented everything else.